I'll be the first to say that we typically don't even take female matchmaking clients because I know how hard it is to match women. And this is the controversial thing I'm going to say. The matchmakers that I think are actually worth it as it pertains to straight women hiring to find a man, they typically cost $50,000 to $75,000, which is a lot of money. And I don't think it's for everyone. It's specifically not for people who have never been in a relationship. But I also feel like if you're going to spend $50,000, let's exhaust other things that are a little bit more cost effective that would certainly expand your social network to be more conducive of you meeting someone who's already circle adjacent to you. You know, I really believe that a great match for you, you probably already know them through a friend.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today on Her Money. I am Jean Chatzky, and a very happy Valentine's Day to all of you. If you have ever looked for love online, you know exactly how tricky, some may say impossible, it can be to find your person. Even after you wade through the pictures of creeps with their big fish, you simply can't assess emotional and financial compatibility via a very brief profile. And the frustrations in navigating the online dating minefield are exactly why many people turn to a matchmaker. But while their service is top-notch, their price tag often is as well. Some women, we've heard, are willing to spend up to $300,000 to hire them. Ouch. But my guest today, Maria Avgitidis, aka Matchmaker Maria on socials, says that's a big no-no. You don't have to shell out bucks that big. We're going to get into it. Maria, welcome.
Hi, Jean. Thank you so much for having me, and happy Valentine's Day to you too.
I love Valentine's Day. I love it all, from the little tiny candy hearts to the flowers and the dinners and the romance. I'm a sucker. You are not a sucker. You are a fourth generation matchmaker and the CEO of Agape Match, which I learned in talking to you is Greek for love. So you've seen it all. Why are you against women spending money on a match?
I don't know if I'm necessarily against someone spending money on a match. Certainly, there are plenty of people who get a lot of benefit in having someone literally turn every stone to find that person for them. I just think that before you hire a professional, before you outsource this really intimate part of your life, there has to be a lot more conversation about, is this right for you? And also, do you have the right mindset in going into it?
There are many women who date and date and date and are just not having a lot of luck finding their match. Why are they stuck?
It's hard to answer this in a really sweeping generalization because I don't know how many of these women who date and date and date, where they're meeting the people that they're dating and dating and dating.
Let's say they're meeting them online.
Yeah. And that is a predominant majority right now, right? We are at a time where especially millennial and Gen X women, they are predominantly searching for people online. And I think one of the things that's really hard about online dating is at the time that we're using online dating, if we look at it from like a macro perspective, but also how they're built, right? So when we look at a lot of online dating apps, it didn't used to be like this, but there's unlimited matches. So we as humans using an unlimited match tool makes us more picky. We're not considering, okay, you might have certain things on your list, but there's also things that person has on their list. And now both of you are searching on a tool that if we use the tool like a tool, and we went into it with a different mindset, if we actually filled out our profile correctly, if the people that were searching filled out their profile correctly, if we actually read the profiles, like so many things have to be done correctly for that tool to work for you to actually go out. And so I think one of the things that people are experiencing a lot in 2025 is extreme online dating fatigue. And so the thing that I always tell people is, well, tell me about how many hours you're using right now to swipe and how many hours does it take before you actually go on a physical date with someone? Can we reinvest that time that you are using online? Maybe we could take a break. We don't have to fully break up. We could be like Ross and Rachel. We're on a break, but we can take a break and utilize that time in a different way where we get to live our lives. We have so many women I meet, they're so incredible. They have such incredible lives. I'm not saying you to pick up a hobby to meet someone new, but I am saying that what's your bucket list look like?
Essentially, you're talking about articulating what you're looking for, right? Figuring
Yeah,
out what you want. I mean, I can't control what an ocean full of matches is putting on their profiles. I can
right.
only control what I'm putting on my profile. But I think knowing and being able to articulate what you actually are looking for is a very important step one.
I don't think if you're going to utilize the online dating apps, the best way is not to necessarily put what you're looking for. No one likes to read a list on an online dating app. And the real estate for prompts is so small. So I always tell people, like, it's time for you to describe who you are, what your values are. One of my favorite prompts is like a typical Sunday, and start listing out what does a good Sunday look like for you. Or another favorite prompt that I have is I go crazy for, and like you can talk about what you actually go crazy for. Are you the kind of person who likes to go crazy for credit card points and you like to help people find the best deal? I think what this does when you answer it in a value way, in a lifestyle way, even in a socioeconomic, if you answer the questions that are about you and not about who you're looking for, it's my hope that the people will self-select themselves into what you're looking for. Because at the end of the day, what's going to make a good match is not just the shared core values, which you cannot learn until you actually go on a physical date. I mean, I could argue even a phone date, but it's also the shared lifestyle, which can revolve around socioeconomic status.
When you talk about compatibility, you talk about 5 dimensions, 5 pillars of
Yeah.
compatibility, and you rank them from most important to least important. You mentioned the guy who still has all his hair. I have a friend who sadly is a young widow, and he says that he is just catnip because he has all his hair and he can drive at night. So that's physical. It's a little bit,
Yeah.
I guess it's mostly
Unearned
physical.
character traits.
Exactly. He does have very nice hair, but that is besides the point. But you say physical is the least important, followed by the spiritual, intellectual, financial, and emotional. Can we talk about why they line up that way?
So in my book, Ask a Matchmaker, I actually talk about the 5 pillars of compatibility. And it's interesting because we receive them in the opposite order. So the thing that is not really going to matter in long-term compatibility, which is physical, you discover that first, right? No woman has ever gone to a bar or even a friend's wedding and saw a man across the room and said, I bet you that guy has a great personality. No, and we all think he's cute. He's not cute. Or another thing about physical compatibility, which I think is important, and it is the no-go question that all women ask themselves whenever they meet anybody, is the C factor, the creep factor. I feel like we've all been there where someone could be fantastic on paper and then you meet them and you're like, oh, you're a creep. And it's so quick. It's gut level instinct and you just stop talking to them, right? You don't engage. You see this even if you're on the subway, even if you're at a restaurant. There is this sort of like innate way of how we judge people. And of course, men do the same. They don't have the C factor instilled in them. And that's a different conversation for a different day. But for sure, men have a physical criteria that is probably a lot more weighted against men and women, regardless of sexuality. But it's certainly a lot more weighted than women give it credit. So like, it's been my experience in working with men for over 15 years that they will judge attraction within the first minute. And that's it. It doesn't matter how great the date is. If they're not attracted to you, there's just never going to be a second date. I've never seen it happen. Whereas with women, a woman will meet a man. He doesn't have the C factor, so he's not a creep. So, okay, we've passed that. And then maybe let's just pretend, let's do scales for a second. Let's say he's a 5 out of 10. but he asks her questions. He's an active listener. He makes her laugh. He takes a little bit of charge and orders her a drink at the bar. Suddenly that 5 is an 11. And so women definitely take more time to discover who they're attracted to than men. At least that's been my experience as a professional matchmaker. But I also see this in all of the people that I talk to every single day. But then that just takes a back seat. After 3 weeks, physical attraction is, and I'm not talking about sex now, I'm just talking about the physical attractiveness. It just goes out the window. And now the things that are way more important, and the two most important, are emotional compatibility and financial compatibility. That's at the top. And that's what's going to determine how safe you are in a relationship. That's going to determine how rich you are in a relationship. And that could be figuratively or literally. And it also means how much mental wellness you're going to have in that relationship. So these two things are just so important, but it takes time to discover them. You don't learn about these things within the first 2-3 dates. For some people, it's not even the first 2-3 months.
First of all, as the host of a podcast about money and the recipient of so many questions where our listeners outline the problems that they've had regarding money in their relationships, I'm thrilled to see finances rank so highly on your list because, I've always known this is a problem area. There are studies that show that the number one thing couples fight about is money. There are other studies that show the more often we fight about money, the more likely we are to divorce. How do you assess financial compatibility in an environment where we are often raised not to talk about money?
I think we should talk about money. We should talk about money all the time. I just don't think people realize what is a money talk. So one of the things that I like to tell people as they're preparing to date is to actually talk about what financial compatibility is to you. And to me, financial compatibility at the end of the day is what's called lifestyle. And the formula that I like to use to measure your lifestyle is, how do you value the way you spend your time? Plus, how do you value the way you spend your money? And that is what equals your lifestyle. So if we're going to talk about your lifestyle now and how we're going to have those money conversations as quick as possible, it's about asking yourself questions that you should not be reacting to, questions that you understand the answer to and can actually have in-depth conversations about. So some of the questions I would ask you, for instance, is, do you plan to have children? If you've already had children, do you intend to pay for their bachelor's degree should they go to college? Do you envision yourself buying a home or renting a home in the next 10 years? If you won the lottery that your boss gave you the scratch off ticket to, I like to always add that little extra thing. What are you going to do with the money? Let's say it's $1 million. And you'd be surprised, if you come up with the answers to these, or if I ask you even I want you to write down, if you won the lottery and you had, the only way you could spend this money is to buy your dream home, where is that dream home? Just give it to me, visualize it for me, right? If you have an elder parent who might need care one day, who is taking care of it? Who's taking care of them? Who's taking care of the bills? These are questions that need answers. And they're not reaction answers. So this way, if I know the answer to, for instance, what I would do if I won the lottery, or what does my dream home look like, or what does my fantasy life look like, right? That means that when I'm on a first date and we're passing by that brownstone that's on my little vision board, I can say, if I won the lottery, this is the exact brownstone I would buy. So I'm already adding now a little green flag about we're having some money conversations, even though we're in fantasy land. But then I can also say, in that conversation on a first or second or third date, I can say, my parents are getting older and I've thought about it. I think, I've talked to my sister about it. And I feel like if things get a little bit more sticky, they'll probably come and live with me. Of course, I'd have to talk to my partner and we would discuss how this would impact us. But I just feel more comfortable caring for my parents than sending them off to an elder care facility. What do you think about that? That conversation, elder care, is a money conversation.
Sure it is.
Right? But now I'm having a discussion. I'm allowing myself to quickly have these money conversations without asking, how much money do you make?
Going back to the second question that you mentioned, you have a child. You have thought about whether you're going to pay for their bachelor's degree or allow some borrowing into the equation, or if borrowing is going to be necessary. How do you raise that one? And what are you looking for in a response? I mean, that could vary quickly, I think, on a first or second date go down the tubes in
Good.
terms of disagreement.
So here's what I think about that specific question. I want everyone to have an answer to this question, but also be willing to change their mind. And what I mean by that is, even when I asked myself this question when I was a single woman, I knew because my parents helped me with my bachelor's degree education. I mean, I had a scholarship, but I needed room and board, and my parents paid for that, right? I knew what sacrifices my parents had to do, but I knew that I could do the things that I wanted to do by having that. And that's okay if other people disagree with what my parents did. But I know that when I have children, at the time when I was a single woman, that I would want to offer them the same, that I would work as hard as I can to be able to let them be a student without having to worry about XYZ. They can get a part-time job. I certainly had a part-time job when I was in my bachelor's degree, but I was able to focus on being a student. So because I already have an answer to that question, I remember that when I would date and this question would come up, and I would make sure that these questions would come up as a single woman, because I do know that a lot of divorces circle around money. I want to make sure that they have the same value set as me, because at the end of the day, money is about values. Money is about how we look at money. In that, I remember there were men who I would meet who would say, oh my God, my parents, they didn't help me. And when I was 18 and in high school, I was actually paying them rent, and my kids are going to do the same. You and I do not have the same background right now to make this work. And I'm going to throw you another reason why this matters, right? Before online dating, people met through their own community. Mm-hmm. People met either at church or synagogue or temple barbecues. People met at friends' weddings. There were so many accountability partners built in. But another thing is that when you met through your own community, you were already 50% of the way there with people that shared in your value system that you were likely raised with. When you are online dating, that foundation just doesn't exist, right? You're meeting complete strangers. So you actually have to have these conversations that your parents likely never got to do. And maybe that's a good thing, right? Maybe it's a good thing that you're having these conversations up front, because you really just want to ultimately see, do we share the same worldview? Do we share the same morality? Do we have similar empathy compasses? And this is essentially what money revolves around, right? Is how do we look at money as the tool for us to get the life that we want?
What I like about these scenarios is that, and I say this a lot, that the initial money conversations are not really about money, right? They're about your hopes and your dreams and your goals and your responsibilities. And you can attach numbers to those conversations down the road. What I'm wondering, and I'm thinking of a couple of young women that I know who are in their 30s, would like to have partners, don't have partners, or are trying to find people, is I think they would look at me with these questions and think, I am not going there. I am going to scare these people off, and I'm not going to get to the second or third or fourth date. And I wonder where the line is. How do you know that you're in a space where you can broach these conversations, or the one about whether or not you want to have kids, or the one about whether or not you should merge money, right? How do you get there?
I actually encourage everyone, if they can, to not ask so much questions on the first and second date. The purpose of first dates is to go on a second date. But the purpose of the first 2 dates is to just talk about you, showcase who you are as an individual at this moment in time, at this present time. What brought you here on this date today? The purpose of date 3 and 4, should you go on one, is how do we date together? How does this work? So I think there's all this pressure being put on what a first date is. And, first date's just the meetup, right? Are we vibing? Are we checking ourselves out? Are they being polite and self-aware to the people around them, right? That's all a first date is. So I don't know if necessarily a first date needs to be like so money driven. One of the things that you just mentioned is about, what about people who want to merge their incomes? Studies have shown that couples who merge their incomes have a lesser degree to divorce. Mm-hmm. Now, listen, I'm not talking about people who are being financially abused. I'm certainly not going to talk about people who don't have access to their money and therefore cannot afford divorce. Divorce is very expensive. But one of the reasons why people who might have a shared checking account might also benefit in being a good marriage is one, they had to trust that person enough to share a checking account. But two, if you are sharing a checking account and you are exhibiting healthy relationship traits, chances are that you are having money conversations every single month or every single quarter about where we are on our budget, how are we spending our money. And the couples that are having those sort of conversations on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, because money is such a intimate and hard conversation to have with anybody, even with your siblings, your friends, your parents, right? It's really personal.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you have that social and emotional muscle from talking about something so hard, when other relationship problems come around that have nothing to do with money, you can still use those social and emotional resources that you've built up, your positive bidding, in a sense, to tackle those problems as well.
We had the researcher who conducted that study about shared checking accounts on the show. We'll link to it in the show notes in case anybody missed it. So it is Valentine's Day. We know there are lots of amazing women who are celebrating with our galentines, which we applaud. If you are looking to date, people tend to, these days, go the online route. They say to friends, please fix me up. And eventually, many of them will try some sort of a matchmaker or a matchmaking service. Can you tell us how these things are supposed to work? How much they should cost? What are the expenses that you think are worth paying for? And look, if we're going to go down this road, we want to go down it knowing that we're being smart consumers of the services that we're buying.
Oh, I'm going to give you a really controversial answer. The matchmakers that I think are actually worth it as it pertains to straight women hiring to find a man, they typically cost $50,000 to $75,000, which is a lot of money. And I don't think it's for everyone. And when I say it's not for everyone, it's specifically not for people who have never been in a relationship. So it's like, okay, and now I'm going to throw money at this, right? And it's like, no, if the matchmaker's job is just to find people that are enthusiastic to meet you, if you don't know how to take those other steps of being authentically yourself and getting yourself into a relationship, that might not be the best route. But I also feel like if you're going to spend $50,000, let's exhaust other things that are a little bit more cost effective that would certainly expand your social network to be more conducive of you meeting someone who's already circle adjacent to you. Because I really believe that, I fundamentally believe that a great match for you, you probably already know them through a friend. And sometimes the friends that you have, we got to replace them with new friends.
I'm thinking, so I have one friend now who's dating a man that she met through a matchmaker. She paid, if not $50,000, $40,000.
Yeah.
But she had been dating. She just needed a slightly wider circle to meet the right people. And she's thrilled. I have another woman in my circle, a young woman who's online dating, hired a much less costly service to help her just do the online dating thing better, to say the things in her responses that are better, to swipe on people that she wouldn't think about. And that has been successful too. So I'd like to sort of understand, for people who want to match, for people who want their children to match, what order do you take these steps?
So if I were someone who's like, Maria, I've got $10,000, what do I do? If you have $10,000, you're not hiring a matchmaker. I just don't think that's the right route. But I do say that there are a lot of other resources. So there is, first off, everyone needs to go book some online dating photography. You can certainly Google online dating photographer. There are plenty of them out there. A lot of photographers, they know exactly what this is. It's not new. And go on that photo shoot. And if you don't want to spend, it's usually between $300 to $500. If you don't want to spend that money, grab a friend and 3 outfits and be a tourist in your city for a day. You're going to treat them to brunch, and then you're going to take photos outside museums, down the street, at the park, by the pier. Like, we want backgrounds. We're going to change our outfits at every Starbucks, but that's what you're getting, right? But that's actually really important if you're online dating. The second thing is you're going to look at this is now free. You're going to look at your prompts and actually fill them out where it talks about you and not necessarily what you're looking for. Number three, you're going to open up the Eventbrite app or the Meetup app, and you're going to pick 4 things to do in the next 6 weeks. I want one of those 4 things, though, to become a weekly class. So this is the time where you think about, I've always wanted to learn how to do wine tasting, or I've always wanted to learn how to be a creative writer, or I've always wanted to do golf lessons. I want you to do 3 events. Maybe it's a lecture. Maybe an author is giving a chapter reading. Maybe there is a foraging hike that's so popular in LA before the fires. I hope it comes back. But there are certain things that are happening on Eventbrite and Meetup that meet up once. But then I want one of those things to be something that meets up weekly. I'll tell you that my husband, he belongs to a backgammon club. And right now, Backgammon NYC is the fastest growing group because people just want to meet other people while playing a really old game like backgammon. And what this is doing, though, is it's forcing you to go out and actually make authentic connections. We don't want to be online. We want to be offline. So we can let the online dating app work on itself, but we also have to develop our offline tentacles. Now, the last thing I would do, and this is something that I promote, is I really want you to do something that's group-based that makes you have adventure. And what adventure will do is that it's going to create bonds between you and the group where you can now have new friendships to look upon. And then also another challenge that I give people, and I know this is going to sound so silly, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do it. But it's really a game changer. I want you to say hello to 5 people in the next 5 days.
Just say hello.
Just say hello. Hello. That's it. Hello. That's it. It's shocking how many people, I would venture to guess about 80% of people, do not talk to people on a day-to-day basis. A lot of people are working from home. This is only contributing not only to the loneliness epidemic that is being felt by a lot of people in the States right now, but it's also, we don't have a lot of third spaces anymore, right? The malls are dead. People are meeting online. A lot of people are working from home. Like, you need to go out of your way and say hello to 5 people. Even if it's women, I don't care. But it creates this sort of, it does build on your courage if you think to yourself, I have to say hi to 5 people every single week.
I love it. I love it. I wanted to ask you one more question, Maria, specifically about the money. In your new book, which is called Ask a Matchmaker, Matchmaker Maria's No-Nonsense Guide to Finding Love, you talk about dating a shipping heir and realizing that you were not financially compatible because even though he'd been spending like crazy on you since day one, dating him felt more like a vacation than real life, your words. So what did that feel like to you? And how, when we're looking for that financial compatibility, how do you know if it's right or if your partner's quirks are something that you are not going to be able to live with for the next 50 years?
So I didn't know this. He told me like 6 weeks in, but he told me he was a yacht broker and I was like, okay, that's acceptable. But he was a proper shipping heir. And the thing about shipping heirs, I've even had them as clients, they're ungoogleable, right? So it's a very different world to be involved in. But anyway, I was dating the shipping heir and it was a vacation, right? Everything was being paid for. But the thing is, in entering that relationship with him, I already knew what kind of life I envisioned for myself should I have children. And for me, that life revolved around my church. I'm Greek American. I was raised in a Greek American community in Central Jersey. I went to Greek school after school. I did Greek folk dancing twice a week. I did Sunday school. And that community, this is my family that it's chosen because the rest of my blood family lives in Greece. It was so important for me to have this for my children. Like, it just made sense to me. And so in dating him, one of the big cracks was when I would share what I loved about my childhood, what I felt I was so honored to participate in. And I know it sounds just like my big fat Greek wedding, but I feel like it's relatable to anyone who belongs to a niche subculture in the US or Canada or even anywhere in the diaspora. It was something that was just very special to me. And what did he have? He went to boarding school. And I'm not trying to take away from the very enriched experience that someone can have in boarding school. That's its own community. But it was like I'm talking to someone from a different planet. And so to him, it was fun talking to me because like I say in the book, he was almost like a cultural anthropologist learning about middle class life. For me, I didn't know what questions to ask him because I don't have the right words to ask him those questions. So the cracks started to show up, and I was willing to like kind of be blinded by them because I enjoyed the vacation, you know? It did affect though my ambition very quickly. I remember I'd have to stay after work to like, I'd stay late in the office. I have to work on something. This is my business. I have employees. I got to hustle. And he'd say, oh, come on, let's just, let's go to the premiere of this and you can just deal with it tomorrow. And it's like, sure, until finally, it's like, okay, now I have a mountain of work. I really have to get it done. And so it was hard because we did not share in the same lifestyle. And again, what is lifestyle? It's the way you value your money and the way you value your time. And we might have had maybe the same values in money, but the way we valued our time was just so substantially different. And I don't think we could have had kids together without having some pretty crazy money fights.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Such an interesting story and so much to pull from it to help our listeners on this Valentine's Day. Maria, thank you so much for a great conversation. I know you're going to come back on Friday, answer some questions for our listeners. But if there are women listening who want to get into your dating pool or who are looking for additional matchmaking or dating advice, where can they find you?
So the first thing you could do is, of course, follow me on Instagram at Matchmaker Maria, but you can also visit matchmakermaria.com. It's got all the stuff there. You can join my database. You can go on a trip with me to Greece this summer. I'd love to have you. You can join a group intensive. We have a new cohort every month. And of course, you can pre-order my book on the website as well.
Thank you so much.